Hello and welcome back, viewers. So last week we made some foot pegs up and also modified a pair of bars, and I've been riding it throughout the week and I really like them. So that's great, but I need to push forwards and make a few more modifications. Today is really going to be a little bit of experimenting, just so that I've got time, like I said last week, to give things a ride and see what I think of them. So today we're going to play around a little bit with the exhausts, and also we're going to hopefully sort out some sort of air filtration system. So when it comes to off-roading, there can be a lot of dust, particles, water, things like that, that can cause all sorts of problems if you don't have an air filter. I don't have an air filter, but I should. So last year when I went to the Malle Mile, I was with quite a few mates who also had similar setups, and we were all running around with a pair of tights, cable tied around the end of the bell mouth, which is not very good. So something needs to be done about that. What I've got here is a little K&N style filter. I've never ever used a K&N style filter before. I like the foam ones. But this one is actually apparently made to screw straight onto a 376 monoblock, which is what I've got on there. So really this is quite a quick and easy fix because I can just chuck that on there, and that's at least going to protect it a little bit. It's also not going to restrict airflow too much. So hopefully that's the right way to go about things. At some point I would really like to go about making my own air filter, because when you start looking into desert races, the air filter was a huge part of it. And you see anything right from the standard pancake air filter to custom setups that have been made out of coffee tins. That sort of thing really appeals to me, and at some point I'd like to give it a go. But it is a can of worms really, because restricting the airflow, you're going to have to muck around with jetting and things like that. And in all honesty, I haven't got time for that. As I say, I'm not going to have much time to sort of really fine tune this and ride it before I go to the Malle Mile, which is in a few weeks time. So hopefully this is kind of a quick and easy fix we can just chuck on there and it will just protect it a little bit. Now on this particular model Triumph, it's got a single backbone and it finishes about here, which makes it a really tight fit for any air filters you might have or bell mouth. So I'm going to have to at least slacken off the nuts on the carb, turn it to the side and remove the bell mouth that way. Well, as is quite often the case, it wasn't a straightforward job at all, and it's not a done job either. So as I said earlier, it's very tight in there because of that backbone on the frame. So tight that this filter won't fit in there. It's fouling on that at the moment, which is obviously not good. But the other thing is, on screwing this on, the base of this actually hits the banjo on the carburetor, which is an issue because it stops me from screwing this all the way on. Now, gauging how much further it could screw on without the banjo, I think if I can get it to seat properly, basically it will fit in there. So I think what the best thing to do would be to remove that banjo, screw it all the way on, see if it fits. If it does, we'll have to look at a way of potentially modifying that little banjo piece to see whether it will fit in at all. Right, well, I've been fumbling around with this thing for about 40 minutes and trying to work out a way that I could possibly fit it. And there just is no way, I'm sure of it. I cannot compute a way of getting it to fit on there. And I thought, well, you know, maybe this works for another motorcycle where there's a lot more space behind there. But it just can't, because by the time you've fully seated this on the carburetor, you've used all the thread on the intake, it is touching the filter underneath the banjo. So let alone having the banjo on there, it's never going to fit. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that. So when you thread this on, it actually has to hit the filter before it's fully seated, and that's without the little cover on it. So that's an absolutely naff product. Don't go and buy one of those. I think we're going to have to scrap that entirely, because I've been thinking of ways that I could modify it, or modify the banjo on a carburetor, but it's just not going to work. Yeah, I'm absolutely stumped. Right, so we're going to remove that, scrap that entirely, and write to the sellers on eBay. The bell mouth will live to breathe another day. Now, one thing I'm going to do whilst I'm here, having a look at this little filter here, it's got a little bit of gunk on it, so I'm going to clean that out. Now, another thing I've managed to do is get fuel on the sealing O-ring between the carburetor and the intake. That's not good. If you ever have done that, you'll know that they swell up and they are simply impossible to get back in. So in a moment, I'm going to show you a little trick that I use to return these to their normal size, and then we can pop this back together. Right, so I've cleaned out my little filter for the feed down from the tank. That's all back on and ready to go. Now we need to look at this little O-ring. Now these little rubber O-rings have a habit of swelling up if you get fuel on there or carb cleaner. It will do that, and it's very easy to forget about them. Some Japanese carburetors actually have quite complex versions of these to seal the float bowl, and it is infuriating when they swell and you can't get them back in. So what I'm going to do is restore this to its usual shape by making a cup of coffee. Well, not exactly. I'm going to boil the kettle. I'm going to make a cup of coffee, and I'm also just going to pour out a cup of boiling water. I'm going to chuck that in there, leave that for 10 minutes. When it's cooled down and I come back to it, should be normal sized. So whilst the O-ring sits in that boiled water, I'm going to get on with another job, which is going to be changing the exhaust. This is really something I just want to see how it looks, but also the exhaust system I've got sticks out quite far. This might be more useful for moving my feet around. I might be able to get better positions and hopefully not burn my leg if I go down. So what I've got is this, which is very, very ugly. This is actually the pipe that came to me on the bike, and someone has spent a lot of time bodging it together. Oddly enough, that's why it appeals to me. So I'm going to whip off the old exhaust, pop this one on, and just get a gauge for how it kind of looks. Right, so that's the new pipes on, or old pipes as it were, and I really like the way it looks. It looks quite fast, it looks pretty purposefully made. As I was saying earlier, I really like the way this has kind of been modified, and it's not terribly well done, but it just makes me wonder why the previous owner might have modified it. Was it for competition use? Was it for look? You just don't know, but it's very interesting to me anyway, so I'm glad I put it on there. I will need a way of securing it at the back. I'm not going to have time to do that today. But it should be alright just to get me home like that, fingers crossed. I've seen a few desert racers with pipes similar to this, where they kind of curve out, have a little slash cut on there. I think I'm going to modify this in some way. So it just comes a little bit further back, and also I can probably clamp it onto the frame. So the O-ring that I was talking to you about earlier, that's now dry. I don't know whether it makes a difference to let it dry or not, but I always do. So I took it out of the boiling water, let it dry, and now it's time to fit it back on, pop the carb on, and then pop the bell mouth back on. Right, well the carb's back on, the O-ring snapped back in perfectly, so that's great. And I've got to rush off now, so I suppose the only thing left to do is give it a little sound test, and we'll see what it sounds like. I'm pretty pleased with the way that sounded. You know, even just sitting on it, I immediately noticed that I don't have to be wary about burning my legs on the exhaust, which is obviously a great thing for off-roading because you end up making substitutes, putting your feet places to avoid getting burnt, which is not ideal. So hopefully this is going to work out better. I will be modifying it, as I said. I might extend it. I also need to make a mount up the back so that it stops it from kind of shaking about and that. But that's about it for today's episode. Obviously the air filter didn't work out, so something is going to have to get done about that. Maybe I'll get a pancake filter, or maybe I will run a foam one on there. I'm not sure. So if you learned anything from today, it's probably don't go and buy one of those air filters. Hopefully you enjoyed it and you're enjoying the updates on the Triumph. All this updating will be worth it, I'm sure, once we get to the Malle Mile. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you like. And again, be interesting to hear your thoughts on the exhaust. Do you prefer the one we got now or the one before? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.